welcome to our next episode with Talk'n TRM. My name is bex.deadman. I'm an independent consultant specialising in ISO 31030. And today I'm joined by, I'd like to say, a good friend of mine, because that's the great thing about this journey I've been on. I've met some really cool people that are now friends. So this is my good friend Simon Crane, owner of SC Risk Consulting. And I'll let him talk about what he does and the area that he works in. Let's just have a little reminisce of when we met, Simon. So we were talking earlier off screen, and I think it was 2018.
2018, yeah.
So maybe you can tell everyone a little bit about what you were doing at that time.
So I was working for a company called Global Secure Accreditation at the time, developing standards for hotel security, some global standards, because there aren't any, basically, an area that's not regulated. And I was doing a presentation to, I think it was a BTA event.
Oh, yeah, I think it was.
Accommodation event.
Yeah, accommodation event.
Yeah. And after the presentation, I got jumped on by you, almost literally.
I know, I have a habit of doing that if I like what you're talking about. Sorry. Well, you changed my life. You see, this was the starting point. So I did probably rugby tackle you down, but for me, and I've talked about this in other episodes, it was this kind of all the way through my career, there's been this sort of nagging question that corporates or clients or whoever asked me, which is, how is all this vetted? And I've known that it wasn't. The star ratings for hotels doesn't really mean anything, and it means different things in different countries, and everyone's operating their own thing. And really, it's about features and benefits as opposed to the important things around security. So I was just, after sort of 15 years in this industry, selling a big, when I was at HRS, obviously selling a bed bank as well for all intents and purposes. It was just this relief that somebody was actually thinking about this. And it was a great presentation as well. I mean, who doesn't listen to an ex-copper? You just kind of command the stage. And I'm giving your stuff away, so I should stop.
That's okay.
So thank you so much for joining us. So we've got our viewers online. So obviously we are filming this, but we've also got our audio for our podcast as well. So I'm going to start with the 3 questions, and we'll see how we get on. So firstly, to set you up, hopefully you can do this one with no issue at all, without only too much of emotion, because that's what the second one's about. I'd like to ask, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, so as Bex said, Simon Crane, I'm the Managing Director and founder of SC Risk Consulting. We are a consultancy that helps organisations understand what their strategic risks are, and helps them put in mechanisms to manage those risks. A lot of small to medium organisations are very inward looking, and look at what goes on day to day, but don't really look at the wider geopolitical picture that could affect their supply chains, their future business, and those areas of that they neglect, unfortunately. So we help them with that. We also provide a virtual head of security service, so we can provide a head of security for an organisation rather than having to employ somebody. They've got us at the end of a phone 24/7, 365. And we can help them with any security-based questions that they have. We've written policies for people. We do a range of services for them. And I've just started another company, SC Protective Services Limited, which now provides working with SC Risk Consulting, now provides a real single solution for protective security for our clients. As an example, a travel management company, a high-end travel management company, have now got us as a single solution provider for their clients when they travel to the UK. So from the strategic partnerships that we've built, I'm going to talk about smoke and mirrors quite a lot today.
One of my favourite phrases, Simon.
There's a lot of it in travel risk, in risk management, in strategic risk management,
in travel management too.
Yes, yeah. And I'm very clear that I will never white label and say I can do everything. If I use a strategic partner, and I've got some best in breed strategic partners because my reputation depends on it, I will always tell my clients that I'm using a strategic partner. Whether that's one of the private jet companies we use, or ground transport, or QCC Global, which is a really good basically bug sweep people. They sweep offices, homes, yachts, planes. I will always tell a client I'm using them, and it's not me doing it. I will arrange it, I'll project manage it, and that's my role. But I won't say that I am the jack of all trades and master of none, basically, which is all a lot of people do. So that's what I do from a day-to-day point of view. And a really interesting piece that I find fascinating, and since I got involved in travel in 2018, is the travel risk management side, which is where obviously I'm now positioned with bex.
You are, and I'm leaning on you all the time for different things. There's just a couple of things I want to pick up there. So first of all, this kind of outsourced security piece.
Yes.
I'm guessing that's kind of really aimed at the kind of SME market, which we talk about a lot at this time.
Yes.
Actually, though, they're kind of understaffed, under-resourced, and a lot of people are wearing hats. So often this idea of a GSOC or security doesn't come until the company is much, much larger. And even then, it's likely that they can't insource that. It's a big operation, isn't it, to get it right? So this sort of solution is helping, the SME type corporate as well, which I think is really important. So is that right?
Yes, and there's a huge gap in travel management for those organisations as well.
Yes.
As you say, multi-hatting within the organisation. All the up to C-suite level, that they're all doing far too much of stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and they're fire brigade, fire brigading at the end of the day. They're putting out fires left, right, and centre, and not really concentrating on one thing. Where we can give them that focus, we can provide that focus. Just give us the problem, we'll provide you with the solution.
Yeah,
and a number of options for that solution. So.
No, it's perfect. And then this the third part that you were talking about, where you are kind of providing this sort of security solution for corporates. Yeah. I think it's interesting how this piece has evolved. So, companies who have, high risk assets or work in high risk destinations or want to do that are much more, or perhaps, their company itself is quite high risk. You think of some of the sort of social media platforms and who their leaders are, and that's a kind of different look. So those guys are really kind of moving forward in this space, and innovative things being put in place. And I've had the opportunity to see some of this stuff, and it's really interesting. But of course, not everybody can do that. And if you're going to really kind of delve deep and align with 31030 and some of the other risk management processes, there's a lot of policies, there's a lot of processes, and someone has to have an understanding of that. But what I think there is an opportunity, and it sounds like this is something that you're looking at in your field, is actually what everyone needs to think about is quite similar. It's then tailored for your business. So is there a way to kind of bring a package that kind of helps that? So is that the right, have I got the right idea with what's going on?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've spoken before about, risk management is risk management. It's how you apply it to a particular organisation or a discipline like travel. So there are only so many ways you can manage risk, and there are lots of frameworks out there that you can use, but there's only so many ways you can do it. And the same with protective security. There's only so many ways you can do it. Obviously, there's people innovating all the time, looking at new and emerging threats around cyber and drones, etc. Those sorts of issues, but what people don't and what travel management companies that I've spoken to don't want to do is keep going to different providers to bring all those pieces together. Having someone that can just say, right, this is the problem, solve it for me, is what we're providing. And having the consulting side and the protective security side working in tandem, we can write them policies, we can help them with a wide range of services, as well as day-to-day protection of their principles. And it's not just high-risk countries. A lot of protection goes on in the UK, and protest is obviously quite a big thing now. And one of our latest jobs was an animal rights-based issue. So it's not just the high-risk countries, and usually the operations that go on in high-risk countries are very good because they're rehearsed and everyone knows what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time. It's the less risky places that people neglect to think about and don't consider in their risk management,
where people aren't expecting it. No, I completely agree. And I think we are going through, if you take the UK as an example, but it's obviously US and it's mirrored in other countries across Europe, there's this kind of feeling of unrest now. We've all lived through this pandemic where we're in a bit middle of a recession. That can cause desperate acts. We have had, you know, lone wolf acts of terrorism. There's been a lot that's happened. And in fact, you know, the I-30-1030 came from some of those more recent London attacks, and corporates saying, actually, this is bigger than high-risk destinations. Because I think you kind of touched on something that I like to kind of talk about. When we talk about incident management, we kind of always think of the kind of huge crisis situations, which obviously could be weather or terrorism or whatever, or anything that kind of affects a sort of mass loss of life or potential. But actually, a crisis can also be to an individual, and that's when you really open things up. And depending on how that crisis is handled, depends on that experience and that ongoing experience for that person. So it could be a mental health issue. It could be you know, just involved in a road traffic accident. It could be bigger than that. It could be something going on at home which is affecting things. You know, there's just so much, and I think as people, we're so individual and unique. It can feel quite overwhelming when you start looking at it this level. But actually, as long as you've got a few things in place and people there know how to find it and trust that, it's not actually as difficult as it seems. It's just about thinking about some of this stuff. But what I find sorry, go on.
So, and trust is a great word to use. I mean, that's, you know, a trusted provider, someone you know is going to solve that issue if it becomes an issue, or can help you find a solution. And that's what, you know, from a consultant's point of view, you're always putting your arm around the client and saying, oh, I can help you. You know, and that's what we do. You do it from your side.
I do, and it works together nicely.
Yes.
Right, so I realise that we've gone on, as I always do, because it's just so interesting to try and sort of dig a bit deeper into some of these things. But let's talk about your why, Simon. What motivated you to get into this space?
So, as you mentioned, I served 30 years in the Metropolitan Police, and left in 2018 and went straight into a startup global security accreditation, who were just starting to get into the accommodation space, and looking at post-SUS and attacks like that, what standards of security of hotels got. And I helped design the standards for the global standards that global security accreditation now use. I've also since designed the service accommodation standards that they use across apart hotels all the way down to single apartments, and adapted those standards. So started getting into the travel side, realized how nice people in the travel industry are. Went to ITM conference and have never met such a nice bunch of people.
We are nice.
Having come from, you know, fairly rugged background with the police, you know, just meeting such an, you know, obviously you're very customer focused in the travel industry, and you know that really did come across the way everyone was to me, talking to me in those environments. So understood from working then within talking to hotels, going out and seeing hotels, the smoke and mirrors thing really came in. 5-star does not mean 5-star security. I can tell you that for nothing.
Definitely does not.
And a lot of what goes on in hotels in terms of security is smoke and mirrors. They will have great global policies for some of the big hotel groups will have great corporate policies around security and what they expect from their hotels, but many of them are franchised, managed, not actually owned by the entity, and the security standards in the individual hotels can vary massively, even though they've got, you know, supposedly consistent corporate standards.
Yeah.
So designing these standards that really set a benchmark against, you know, corporate being able to say, I know that because this hotel has got this accreditation, they've met this level of standard. And not unreachable standards. You know, these were all proportionate to the level of, you know, we designed the standards so that if you had a security team, a dedicated security team, they would be at this level. If you didn't, then the standards are at this level. Yeah, they were not unreasonable. And then, of course, COVID hit and all the hotels shut. So, unfortunately, I was out of a job. First and only one, I think, to go from the company, because I was a contractor.
Of course.
But
to me too, Simon.
Yeah, I know.
I was the MD.
Yeah,
but look at where we are now. So it's
I'm a great believer in fate, and I got a phone call from an old boss of mine from the Met Police, and he said, "I'm looking for someone. Do you know anybody that might be interested in a job in Libya.
Oh,
and he didn't realize I'd been made redundant. I said, well, he said, I need someone like you that does the sort of stuff you do. I said, well, how about me? So I ended up,
yes, that's exactly what I wanted.
So I ended up in Libya, in Tripoli, working on a security sector reform project, multi-million-dollar project, and ended up as project director. Wow. And again, that brought travel risk very starkly into light with me. So we were traveling throughout the pandemic. We started in June 2020. So we were traveling at the height of the pandemic, initially by private aircraft, then charter, and also then the security risk within Libya itself. We talk about high-risk countries. Obviously, Libya is on that high-risk list of countries that you go to. I felt safer in Tripoli and Martyr Square in Tripoli than I do in some parts of London. Definitely than I do in some parts of America.
Why do you think that was, Simon?
So it's cultural as much as anything. So the Libyans are a very cosmopolitan country for a Muslim country. They are very Italian influenced. It's got the most intact Roman ruins outside of Italy. Beautiful place called Leptis Magna if you ever get a chance to go. I think you used to work in adventure travel.
I did. We used to go to Libya.
Libya used to be some parts of the Sahara, the mother of lakes down in the south. They've got UNESCO, World Heritage sites. Incredible country, and their nature is that they would hate to see harm come to one of their guests or a visitor. So actually, it's interest rather than anything else in you than threat. Obviously, there are issues in some parts of the country we wouldn't go to. The south had become very difficult because of the land borders it has with Chad and places like that. So as long as you were sensible, and obviously we did a lot of risk management around our travel, but you could we didn't use armored vehicles. We used soft skin vehicles. A lot of the like the UN and people like that were driving around in big armored vehicles with in convoys, drawing a lot of attention to themselves. We were in soft skin vehicles, very low profile. We were working with the Interior Ministry, so we had their protection, which obviously goes a long way to help. But it really does. You do need to. I think boots on the ground, understanding the ground truth. I think you'll find a lot of people in travel risk management will talk to you about that, about ground truth.
Jim mentioned it, didn't he? I think on his as well.
Yeah. If you read the State Department advice, Foreign Office advice, it's do not go, do not travel, too dangerous. We didn't find that. Our peak, we had 65 UK expats working for us in Libya. We had one minor road traffic accident, and road traffic accidents are the usual highest risk in most of these countries. Standard driving is not good.
And the roads aren't that great in all places either, are they?
No, exactly. And infrastructure and stuff like that. But so I did my year in Libya, and that really got me thinking about travel risk and how it's not really a recognized discipline. Travel risk manager is not a recognized discipline, and it's such a powerful position within, potentially powerful position within a company. You're sending your employees all around the world. What are you doing to secure them? And the reputational risk, the financial risk, the operational risks, if you get it wrong, are huge.
Exactly.
So, A, why isn't it a profession in its own right? B, why aren't there any qualifications that you can take to become a travel risk manager? So when I got back from Libya, started SC Risk Consulting, and one of the first things I did, I'm a member of the Institute of Strategic Risk Management. And I spoke to them and I said, I want to write qualifications in travel risk management. And I've ended up writing the only two OFQUAL accredited qualifications in travel risk management, a level 4 and a level 5 qualification. I came into travel late, but I am really enthusiastic about it because I see it as such an area of risk for companies that they don't consider, especially that SME group that we spoke about.
It's almost, I always talk about travel as it's just seen as a means to an end as to what it is that you've got to do, and not very much thought is given about to the how. Yes, you might work through an agent or something like that, and then there's this sort of big assumption that everything else is somehow taken care of, and it isn't, because there's quite a lot of responsibility that needs to happen on the corporate, and they just, you can understand when a company grows and the execs travel to begin with, and then it kind of goes on. If you don't get these foundations in place, then it makes life more difficult later. But what I tend to find is that people who are moving forward in this area fast is because they've had some sort of experience. They know they've been ill when they've been away. There's been a death. It's quite dramatic stuff, but they then realise that actually they need a plan for some of this stuff. The qualifications piece really excites me. I've long said, travel managers, that sort of evolution that they go through with a company, they may start life as a PA or an EA and a booker, and eventually they kind of move into those travel manager roles. But again, you don't see them until the company really hits that kind of large spend, or a large kind of corporation, or they're operating in different countries. It's not a role that, it's an opportunity for an outsource, though. Again, I think very, very similarly to the security role. But this idea of a merger, of a travel risk management role, that just makes so much more sense to me. And often, I see it again and again and again, that risk management and travel are in complete silos. Travel isn't often even managed directly. It's maybe via procurement or finance for different reasons. And no one's kind of looking at the bigger picture, which is what travel risk management is telling us to do, and telling us how to do, I think.
And I think there's always been a perception that a travel risk manager will stop you traveling. Whereas where actually, if you look at the risks around it, could open up opportunities. I've spoken to some companies that describe war zones as emerging markets, which they are. And post-conflict areas are massive areas for development, and massive areas for sales. So you would want your sales staff, your engineers, all those sorts of people who don't usually operate in those environments, go into places like that. But a travel manager will just make sure they do it safely rather than stopping them. And it may be that you wouldn't have considered sending them to some places like Libya. And I can tell you, there are places now in Libya where you can operate absolutely safely. So a travel risk manager can be as much of a benefit as people think they're a hindrance. And risk management is always considered a hindrance, but it's not actually. It can open opportunities.
It's all about the perception, isn't it? And it's all really about, I think, that kind of exec buy-in at the top, see it as an opportunity, and then how that's kind of pulled down. Okay, right. So finally, I just want to share with you two are to share with our listeners your golden nugget. So people who are maybe getting into this space, what would you say to them?
So my big thing is always communication, and simple and consistent communication across your organisation. So talk to your travellers, understand your travellers, talk to your C-suite, and please make sure that all your policies apply to everybody, C-suite included, because they're usually the worst offenders of going outside of the plan. The ISO 31030 makes it very clear that domestic travel is as important as international travel. I mean, you send someone from a small village in North Yorkshire to Hackney in London on business, they need to be forewarned as to what the environment they're walking into, or Stoke Newington, Broadwater Farm, anywhere like that in London. So it's not just about international travel to high-risk countries; it's those other areas that people neglect that can still cause problems.
Agree so much, and and then take that to the next level. So that some of these kind of, I don't know, cooler companies that then want to do big events in some of these places. And don't get me wrong, Stoke Newington is wicked for a night out. But do you want to take 200 staff there and then ply them with alcohol and then just let them go into London? So that there's so much to think about in this side of it, isn't it? And it sometimes feels like, excuse the pun, but the fun police have come in. But it's not about that. You can do these things like you've just proved. You can spend a year in Libya and some of these other countries. I think it's so interesting what you say about the people there. That's always been my experience when I've been to sort of slightly higher risk destinations. There's almost a gratitude that you've come. And they want to show you the best of it. But of course, like anything, it's just these isolated incidences can happen, but they happen here, and we are so less prepared here. And like I say, it's not just about these incidents, it's about mental health and other things as well. Well, look, Simon, thank you so much for your time. As always, there's just so much more we can talk about. I'm really looking forward to hearing this one back. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for all these qualifications. We look forward to hearing more about that. And I will see you soon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
This has been Simon Crane and Bex.deadman on Talk'n TRM, our podcast around travel risk management. We look forward to seeing you and listening to us at the next episode.